What is going on, everybody? My name's Jack.
My name's Harry.
Welcome back to our YouTube channel. Today we're hopefully going to be saving you a lot of time because we're going to be sharing with you the 7 mistakes we made when we first started producing.
So, over the last few days, Jack and I have been talking about how we could give you some extra value. And we've come up with a list of 7 tips that are going to help you to avoid the mistakes that we made when we first started making music. So without further ado, let's get straight into the video.
Mistake number 1. Buying too many plugins.
So when we first started making music, the first plugin that we bought was Silence. I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to that one. But what we wish we would have done if we could go back in time was to just stick with Silence and get really, really good and know the synth inside out. We went on and bought Spire, Massive, Serum, and we had all these different plugins which we didn't really know how to use. So we would really recommend that you get really good at using one plugin before you start branching out. And I don't think you need loads of plugins to make, professional sounding music. You can do it with very few layers and very few sounds.
And the other thing is, Splice didn't exist when we first started. We've only been producing for 5 years, but Splice wasn't around then. So nowadays you can rent to own these synths, and that's something that I think we would recommend.
Yeah, massively.
Because then, you're not committed to spending hundreds of dollars or pounds on a plugin. You can try it out for a month, and if you don't get on with it, you can try another one.
Mistake number 2. Not leaving spaces in our melodies.
When we first started producing, we were really scared to have any silence or drops in energy in our songs. So naturally, our songs were really busy and there was too much going on. And I think that one point that Jack made just before we came on camera was that when you allow for space in your melodies and you allow your melodies to breathe, you can really get some more power going.
Yeah. Particularly when it comes to drops in progressive house, like you notice that a lot of our drops, the reason I think they hit so hard is because right before the drop is pretty much silence.
Yeah, nearly always.
And you notice that particularly when you come to the master at the end, if you have quite a loud mix and particularly a big build up, if you haven't got that, silence before the drop doesn't really hit well. So I think, like Harry said, having moments of silence in your songs and in your melodies is something really powerful.
Mistake number 3. Not understanding stereo imaging.
I would argue that this is probably the hardest thing about producing dance music or any type of music. It's very difficult to understand, and I think the major thing that you need to do when you're mixing your songs is mix in mono sometimes, particularly when you're trying to balance the elements, because it'll tell you what elements stand out. But especially with lead sounds in progressive house, it's really important that you keep singling mono on and off because it allows you to see which sounds disappear. I remember when we started producing, we really liked the super souls and the energy, and you'd notice that our songs would be really wide. But then when you single it in mono, if it gets played at a big festival or a club, you'll notice that the lead energy disappears. Would you agree?
Yeah, massively. I think that one thing which all beginner producers do is that the entire song is wide. So you've got your breaks, they're out here on the multimeter. You've got your drops, they're wide. And the one thing which we've learned to really increase power when that drop hits is to have that dynamic difference, isn't it? Is so that the build up is quite mono. Everything gets quite small and then pow.
Yeah.
When the drop hits, you really get that stereo imaging. So yeah, that contrast is really important between breaks and drops.
With regards to how you balance your songs and how you place things in your mix, you can't really substitute listening to your favorite songs and seeing how they position their elements. And I know everyone says this, but unfortunately it's just a case of listening to songs for years. But generally there are a few tips you can abide by, which is you generally want your kick and your bass to be in the center as well as your snare. And then I kind of think of it as you spread as you go. Vocals you want in the center as well, unless they're background or sort of like dub echoes you might want on the sides. And then your leads, like I said a bit earlier, leads are very difficult because you want them to sound wide, but you also need those mono layers. And then anything that's high, so rides, hi-hats, feel free to have them on the sides. I think if you follow those, that'll help you along the journey that is stereo imaging.
Mistake number 4, using too much reverb.
One thing which I'm still guilty of to this day, Jack tells me off like almost daily for adding too much reverb, because personally I love the vibe which it gives and I focus more on the atmosphere of the songs as opposed to the mixing stuff. But I do appreciate that when we first started out, we would add reverb to almost every single layer. We would have reverb on individual drum tracks and then more reverb on drum buses. And what you realise is that after a while, like we just talked about the stereo imaging, you lose all dynamic in the track and nothing hits powerful. There's no break for the listener. So yeah, one really important tip is don't use reverb on every single channel and really scrutinise when you are trying to put it on.
I would agree, and I think definitely when you're using elements like your lead sounds, try and, sidechain the reverb out the way so that you still get some of the power from the leads, but you get atmosphere.
Mistake number 5, thinking that the master will solve everything.
This is something that we see time and time again.
It's something that we really, really struggle with at the beginning. We put so much faith and convinced ourselves that all of our problems would be solved if we could get something professionally mastered or...
Yeah, you'd find this magic mastering chain and everything will be solved. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. We've worked with a lot of bigger artists and generally their master chain is very simple. You're looking at obviously making the whole track louder, some EQ just to add a bit of color, compression and limiting, and generally that's how our master looks. If you want us to do a separate tutorial about mastering, let us know in the comments below and we can do that. But generally, like I said, the magic comes from your mix. Your mix needs to be very good going into the master, and paying a mastering engineer or spending a lot of money on plugins unfortunately isn't going to help you because you won't know how to use them and it's not going to fix a bad mix. Generally, what I would recommend is you invest all of your time into creative plugins and not invest in mastering plugins. I would spend all of your time focusing on perfecting your mixing skills and creative skills than focusing on mastering.
Mistake number 6, not changing the velocity.
So, moving on to tip number 6, and this is a big one for me, and it is making sure that your chords do not have a fixed velocity when they're being played into the MIDI keyboard. This is something which we struggle with for quite some time, and we generally tried to create an atmosphere in our breaks, mainly because of our progressive sound, and we were wondering why our pianos and our pads were sounding so different to what the guys that we were aspiring to sound like did. And the main reason for that was because our notes were all at a max 127 velocity. We discovered that in order to actually get that human feel, you really need to customize the velocity on your notes to make it sound real. There is a feature in Logic which allows us to do that, where you can randomize the notes on velocity. But generally, if you just play around, lower the notes and try and play around with the feel of it, it can completely change the dynamic of the sound which you're trying to create and really create some cool results.
Mistake number 7, thinking that every song has to get signed.
This is something that I think we were really guilty of to begin with.
We felt like we were up against the clock when we first started music, as if we were playing catch up to all the artists which we aspired to be. And that kind of created a system where we were trying to make tracks for an outcome as opposed to actually enjoying them. I'm not saying that we didn't enjoy a lot of our early music, but there were stages where we were following trends and just generally trying to make what was cool at the current time. When we actually took a step back and we decided what we wanted to make was progressive, in a time, when no one was releasing progressive, like 2016, 2017, you couldn't find it anywhere. We actually saw our first results because it was honest and real. It's a really good quote. It was a Professor Axwell. He basically just says, if you were trying to catch a wave, as in a current music trend, you will never catch it because the wave's already gone. You're almost better off going in the exact opposite direction. So, if future bass is cool now, go make hardstyle. It's basically the philosophy because everything comes back around.
We recommend at the beginning making exactly what you want to make and exploring different styles and bringing different genres into what you're making. I think that would be the best advice we could give you from this video.
So that's it for this video, guys. Really hope you enjoyed and learned something. We made a lot of mistakes when we were first starting out, so we hope that we can speed up your journey towards signing a track or getting where you want to go. Make sure you leave in the comments any suggestions for videos that you'd like to see in the future, and take care.
Yeah, if any of these tips helped you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel, because we're going to be posting a lot more over the next couple of weeks. If you haven't already, be sure to check out our last video linked in the description, where we walked through our biggest track to date, Underneath. And yeah, we hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you in the next one.
Take care, guys. Bye bye.